Hi, we're back now. Still talking about the TIAI because this is a very important instrument because this is how you get a whole bunch of points in the fall and double those points in the winter. I want to mention something about indicator number 3 before we leave to go on to the next indicator. This transfer of learning from one subject area to the other is very, very important. Sometimes our students think, okay, I've just got to learn this, pass the test, and I won't have to worry about it again. And I want to give you an example of something that happened to me when I was teaching in the classroom years ago. It was a 6th grade classroom. I had some really bright kids. I also had some who needed a lot of help. It was very definitely a mixed group. One of my brightest young men got very, very upset with me one day when we were having a social studies lesson about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had a writing assignment that I had given them, and so I was turning it back over to the kids after I had looked at it the night before, and there were marks on there, and this really bright child whose name is Whit looked at me and just incredulously said, how could you count off for my commas and my other grammars? And as he was just stuttering and looking at the sheet of paper. This isn't English, this is social studies. And I simply said, well, Whit, why do you think that you learned about commas and subject-verb agreement and spelling to use it across your life? To use it in your writing for everything that we do and for everything that you do in real life. He was quite taken back, and that was a very bright kid. And he was not satisfied with my information that I gave him and went home and complained heartily to his parents, who were friends of mine. And so his mom called and said, keep up the good work. I think it finally dawned on him that you don't just learn something for a test. So this teaching across the curriculum is extremely important. Allow the children to learn about reading even though you're teaching math, to learn about art even though you're teaching social studies. We are really serious about having at least 2 other subject areas involved. So keep that in mind because that's all part of making connections, and those connections are very helpful to students. The next indicator is number 4. Plans appropriate and sequential teaching procedures that include innovative introductions and closures. Teaching procedures incorporate different teaching strategies that positively impact student learning and development. And then the examples are listed, include but are not limited to cooperative learning, discovery learning, demonstration, discussion, inquiry, simulation, etc. Having children become interested in what you are trying to teach them is of vital importance. A long time ago, we used to call it a lesson hook. Do something when you introduce the lesson that makes the children want to listen to you. If it's a joke, if it's a short video, if it's a little acting out scenario that you do. I've seen teachers dress up in period costumes just to get the kids' attention. Anything that you can do to make the children think, hey, this might not be just the regular old mundane teaching, this might be something interesting. So that's what we mean by innovative introductions. And of course, closure is extremely important because you want to be aware of your time limits. When is this period over? When is that bell going to ring? You don't need to let the bell tell you when to stop. You need to know, okay, I've got 5 more minutes. I need to wrap up this lesson. I need to do some type of assessment, formal or informal, so that the children have an idea of, okay, now it's time to close out this lesson and transition on to the next thing. So you've got introductions and closures, extremely important. We will be watching for those. And as you can see, this is mentioned more than once, but exceed standards, which is the highest rating that you can get, talks about the fact that you include why you're doing what you're doing and cite the research that substantiates the use of the instructional strategies that you're using. So you can see that's not necessarily an easy rating of 4 to get, because we'll be looking for, why are you doing this? I mean, is the research there to show that it works? And I want to pause just for a minute here and say, as we get into these 25 indicators, I'm going to repeat something that I said earlier, and that is, we know that it's extremely difficult for a teacher to cram all 25 indicators into one day. Usually we give our undergraduate student teachers a 2-week lesson plan to do, and they have plenty of time to show us all these indicators. But because this is concentrated, and because you're in the MAT, otherwise known as the fast track, then you have to cram some things in, and this is one of those times when you have to show us, either by observation that we see you doing it, or written in your lesson plan, that you have addressed each and every one of these indicators, or you will not get a good rating. It's just that simple. Moving on to indicator 5, plans indicate the use of appropriate assessments that effectively evaluate student learning and development. Examples include assessments that are aligned with your standards and objectives, such as pre-test, post-test, quizzes, unit tests, rubrics, and or checklists. I can't stress how important assessment is. You start a unit with a pre-assessment. How can you plan to teach your particular group of students or groups of students if you don't know where they are and how much they already know about the topic you're about to start teaching? So your pre-test is extremely important. Use a version of your post-test. Give it as a pre-test and say to the students, I'm not taking this as a grade. I just want to see how much you know about this so that I'll know where to tweak my lesson plans. I don't want to bore you if you already know a lot of what I've planned. So we're going to step back and make sure that I'm on target as the teacher so that I can give you the information that you need to learn more about this particular topic or unit that we're studying. So pre-testing is extremely important. Keep that in mind, as are rubrics. And if you've never made a rubric or gotten a rubric off of Rubistar online, then now's the time to start looking at those, because rubrics simply say to students, just like we're saying to you right now, this is what we expect. If you want to get an A, here's what you aim for. And let me take this opportunity to say, always aim for the highest. We call that the target. Whether you're teaching or whether you're learning, aim for the target. If you miss it, at least you aimed for what's the most important. Don't aim to make a C, and don't let your students get in that line of thinking either. I want you to look at the exceed standards, where it says assessments are performance-based to enhance critical thinking and problem solving. We have a critical thinking information sheet that's in the resources on Canvas. I encourage all of you to look at it very carefully. I found a few years ago that when we mentioned the term critical thinking, everybody nodded like, yep, I know exactly what she's talking about, and yet they had no clue. So if you are unsure about what critical thinking skills are,